We ready to start this up again?
What were you saying, Cormac, when I hung up on you?
And then I was sitting there, and they built it wrong.
Welcome to the Archispeak Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. Each episode, Neil Pan, Cormac Phelan, and I have a casual conversation about all things architecture, and we invite you to listen in as we talk about everything in the profession, both the good and the bad. Maybe you're considering a career in architecture, you're still in school, or you've been around the blocks of Corbusier's City of Tomorrow more times than you'd like to admit. Join us in the studio as we stand around the water cooler and talk about why we love our chosen profession. It's time for some Archispeak.
Well, with that, we should welcome everybody to episode 26 of the Archispeak Podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And Evan, we have a friend of the show to announce.
Yeah, we do. Amy McGee, for the second time around here, they're a repeat offender. She donated $10, and her Twitter handle is at TwittiesMcGee. And thank you, Amy, for supporting the Archispeak Podcast again. And we really appreciate it. So everybody else out there, go to archispeakpodcast.com/donate, and we'll read your name on the show as well. So thanks again, everybody.
She's too kind.
She is way too kind.
Yes, thank you, Amy.
So this is the 26th episode. This is it's been a year.
It has been a year. We're closing out the year.
That's right.
At the start of 2014.
Yeah. So who would have thought?
So we get to go on vacation now?
Now we can finally.
I thought we were going to go on like a hiatus, right? A summer hiatus, like regular TV show at the end of season 1. They take 3 or 4 months off.
You know what? I should take a week off.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's what we normally do. And then we record the next one and we come out every 2 weeks.
So yeah, enjoy it.
Oh, thank you, Evan. You're so kind.
Yeah. I'll just be sitting here editing.
No, you'll be done with editing because we're going to publish on Sunday.
Oh, okay. Well, it'll be perfect. There won't be
Super Bowl Sunday.
There won't be any editing.
No, Cormac, the show comes out on Pro Bowl Sunday, the game that nobody watches.
Oh, it comes out this weekend.
Yes, this weekend, as we record this on now Friday.
Not for me.
Nothing like procrastination.
Almost Friday.
I think we talked about that once or twice or 3 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't remember those episodes. Don't make me put that in the show notes.
You gotta go back. Yeah, we got that email from Sam Cleveland, and he said he's gonna go back and listen to all of them again.
I want to ask Sam. I mean,
Sam's
is somebody
brave.
holding a gun to your head to make you do this? Why would you do that? Thank you, though, Sam.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's the kind of email that
That was a
we'd
great.
love
You
to
know
get.
what? That was a fantastic email. That's very cool of him.
Yep. And we got some cool voicemails over the last couple weeks too from a few different people. So I'll throw a couple of those in.
Hi, Archispeak. This is Steve Hall. I am responding to the RFI you guys submitted in podcast 25 regarding caulk. So the word caulk is actually a bad word. It's actually been removed from master spec. Caulk technically refers to a very specific type of latex acrylic sealant that at best only lasts about 5 years. It's really not appropriate for most situations. But sealant, on the other hand, is a generic term that refers to the spec section, which spells out all the types according to their application performance. So if you say sealant, you're covered. The caulk could spell big trouble, especially if you're using master spec. So a lot of firms strike the use of the word caulk to avoid problems, and that's the backstory on why I said never caulk. So anyway, great show, guys. I really enjoy Archispeak. Sometimes tune in to shows, old shows in the middle of the night while I'm drafting. Makes me feel like I'm in studio again. And I find it hilarious that on the episode about spelling, Cormac's name is misspelled in the episode summary. That's priceless. And one last request on spelling, if I could make it. Can we please, all architects, agree to spell facade in English, F-A-C-A-D-E, ASCII 128 without the cedilla, like all the rest of our borrowed words, no exceptions. Anyway, thanks again, guys. Keep it up. This was kind of fun. Maybe I'll call in again sometime. Talk to you later. Bye.
Hey guys, this is Mark R. LePage from Entrepreneur Architect. I'm just calling to congratulate you on an outstanding year at Archispeak. I just finished up listening to your episode 24 and listening to all the amazing things you guys have done this year. And I wanted to just call and thank you for your service to the profession. I think you're doing a great job. And even more importantly, to keep us all entertained every couple of weeks with what you say and what you do. As far as the New York meetup, I'm all in. We'll definitely schedule something for spring or summer of 2014. Watch my probably Facebook or Twitter. I'll catch you guys on Twitter, and we'll set something up, and we'll do that in New York City, and we'll invite the whole world to show up with us, and we'll hang out and have a great time. And lastly, I'm waiting for my T-shirt. Can't wait to get it. Looking forward to it. I ordered it as soon as I saw it was available, and I can't wait to get it. So that's it. Sorry for the long message. You guys have an awesome 2014, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do this year. Have a great one. Thanks. Bye.
So thank you to everybody who's been burning up the hotline here, the Archispeak hotline, in 2014. I mean, I think we got more calls in January.
All of our pagers went off at the same time. There's a new voicemail on the hotline.
Neil got a telegraph.
The bat signal went out.
Yes. I want people to call and tell us their architectural horror story for the week.
Oh, that'd be good.
That would actually be great.
and if it's good,
you got to keep it to like a minute, though.
Yeah, keep it to like a minute or so, or a couple of minutes at most, right? And then just,
I'm filling up with at least 2 hours.
Cormac, you get to talk during the show.
It's your own separate podcast.
You can't call into the hotline. No. That would be great. Wouldn't that be?
I thought you said it was a helpline.
Well, I tell you, if it gets that bad, we're going to have to do a special, helpline sort of episode.
And then I was sitting there, and they built it wrong.
Or I got a call at, what time was it? 5 o'clock at the end of the day, and I spent 2.5 hours on the phone dealing.
We need an intervention.
It was 6 o'clock.
Oh, it was 6. Okay.
It was 6 o'clock. I stayed a little bit late.
Who is the idiot who answered the phone?
At 6 o'clock.
It wasn't me, but
we won't name names.
All I hear yelling across the office was, "Cormac, you still here?" Yeah.
Too late now.
Exactly.
Him? Cormac? No, he left a couple hours ago.
Cormac who?
Cormac who? Oh, that guy, he's not here. This is Charles, not Cormac.
Hey, I got plenty of work done, though.
All right,
so now I don't have to go in tomorrow and answer those 4 RFIs. They're already done.
Well, there you go. There's your pro tip for the week. Stay till 8 and get the work you could do tomorrow morning done the night before.
Speaking of RFIs, sealant or caulk?
He's right. Sealant. Sealant.
Another good phone call.
Yeah. Absolutely right.
That was a great one. So, yes, everybody, please, if you got some interesting story that happened to you during the week or in the last couple of weeks, feel free. Call in. Let it out. What's the number? I don't know. No, it's... He can't just spring that on me. Okay. It's... I know it. It's 415-484-8496. So,
all right.
So call in.
Call the Archispeak Podcast helpline.
Is it the?
And if you can't get through to that one, let me give you Neil's cell phone number. It's
hey
9
guys, do you,
11.
no, no, 916. No. What were those? What were those numbers? All right, no, that's a different podcast. Actually, this does come through to my cell phone, so you'll be getting me anyway. So
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah. So
Make sure it's like 3 a.m. ish
that's okay. You
Pacific.
hey, Apple introduced the Do Not Disturb function. Works great. I never hear it.
Good call. Good call.
Thank goodness for iOS 7. Thank you. So we've got a number of topics, all kind of centered around a few basic ideas that I think we want to talk about, right?
Yeah, sure.
You sound so convinced.
Go ahead. Talk about it.
Well,
what were those?
What are those? You gonna make me do it? Sure. Architectural determinism. See, I can't even say it right. You know, well, I'm going to read this quote because I'll butcher it. But anyway, it's a way to describe the practice of groundlessly asserting that design solutions would change behavior in a predictable and positive way. That's what that basically means. It was coined by a British planner, Maurice Brodie, in 1966. But the idea that architecture can, affect behavior of people, and how do we do that, and who's done it, and has it been successful?
Wait, did you see this quote? That's even better.
Oh,
you can kill a man with a building just as easily as with an axe. It's a little bit further down in the article, but still.
That's awesome.
Wow. So what article are you talking about?
This is the one, it's titled Building, I assume this is the one you're talking about, Building a Better World, Can Architecture Shape Behavior?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that's interesting about this topic to me, working in school and civic design, is that you're working with a huge design team on the client side, and there's all kinds of tug of war that's going on when you're working with the multi-headed client, as we like to say. And so you've got people on the board, you've got people at the school, you've got people in administration, you've got someone in finance, you've got facilities people who are mostly concerned about maintainability and the systems that they're used to maintaining, and stuff like that. So you've got all this different tug of war happening of who wants what, and it's our job to kind of listen to all of them and figure out what's the best thing for this project with all of that input. But I find something that's incredibly interesting is how, there's never enough money, almost never enough money. There's always almost never enough money to build the school that everybody wants, right? But
right.
The classrooms are typically the most bare-bones spaces in the entire complex, but they're the ones that are being utilized the most. And I think that this is kind of the thesis that I was thinking about as we were talking about the topic for tonight, because I read on Jim Meredith's blog, which is meredithstrategyanddesign.com, all spelled out. He had an article called Groundbreaking Architecture Equals Groundbreaking Research, and he was basically writing about the relationship between physicists and the buildings that they do their work in, and how many of the huge physics breakthroughs that have happened throughout the 19th and 20th centuries all happened in pretty boring buildings, because it really wasn't about space inspiring them. And in fact, they were saying that the cafe was the most important space in the whole building, and so maybe there was some architectural attention placed on that to get people to collaborate stuff. But thinking about the projects that we work on at the school, I think we kind of take the same approach. We look for opportunities where paths cross between classrooms, between neighborhoods, between floors, and we try to make those spaces interesting and a place for students to see the work of other students who have different focus in their education, so that they can be kind of revealed to that, the different ways of thinking and teaching and working with their hands or working in the books and stuff like that. And even in the building that we work in, it's kind of set up that way. And I think you were talking about Pixar's building being like that too, Neil.
Yeah, Pixar's building, it was revealed in the Steve Jobs biography when they were designing that they were purposely trying to, design the common spaces. And I think you mentioned bathrooms far away to try and create that different spaces or different areas or where people are going to have to walk by each other, where those types of collaborative, creative sessions could just spring forth by accident.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's similar in what the article, this actually, Jim Meredith's article linked to one in Financial Times Magazine, which was talking about laboratories and stuff. And the physicists that they interviewed, they were basically saying that the cafe is the most important place because that's where they get to talk to other physicists. And they're not working on the same things, so they get these outside set of eyes, or a set of ears listening to what you're working on, and they get to interject and collaborate. And, that's the same thing we do when we hold design critiques, right? I mean, some people are invited who are not working on the project, and a lot of times they'll take a good idea and make it a great one. So I think it's similar. I think we're talking about the same thing there.
Well, going back to what you were talking about with, school design, I can't help but think of some of the design standards that some of the school boards that I work for or work with, they pretty much make a lot of the elementary education classrooms very self-contained. So there isn't really that opportunity to, get out and collaborate. Primary has, a basically block wall interior VCT, bathroom is in the classroom, so they never really get out and get a chance to do that. So, you always have to look for what opportunities, within that particular room can you have, but then you also have, what you're saying is like, okay, now that you're out and kind of free of the classroom, what are some of the other opportunities, breakout spaces within the corridors, all these little things, that, just give you kind of like these little opportunities. But, I was thinking about, okay, so they've got these collaborative spaces like, the coffee bar and like the cafe and things like that. And, we've got, something similar in our office as well, where, a lot of times people basically are hovering around the coffee maker waiting for some coffee and just kind of, shooting the breeze. And in those particular like self-contained classrooms, what can you do to actually make that environment better? I mean, because they aren't really, like the in the article where, they're just kind of doing a singular-minded task, working, doing some kind of like physics experiment, and they're just they don't really care about the surroundings,
It's very inwardly focused. Right?
Yeah, whereas
micro.
Whereas like in, an elementary education, type setting, it is a lot more social. Right. And how do you make those self-contained, classrooms really kind of sing, and that's where we kind of come in and really try to make that environment a lot more inviting and a lot more conducive to, the learning environment.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a trend to create, because technology is growing so fast, the rooms are really just an enabler for technology to happen, where you get a lot of wall space. Teachers like to tack stuff up on the walls and stuff, but there's big surfaces for projection. One thing that's interesting to me, though, more than just how you skin the room or the colors and stuff you use, is even things that we consider when it comes to the shape of the room, because you are kind of governed by an overall target for square footage for these spaces. We're always typically targeting about 960 square feet for a classroom. Yeah. But, for a typical classroom, not a lab. But you can shape that room in many different ways. You can do 30 by 32. You can do 24 by 40. you can do, 25 by 28. There's all these different kind of numbers that work, and depending on how you lay that out, if you go with a more rectangular classroom, you could kind of a little bit more easily divide that room in half and have two smaller groups of kids using it because of that rectangular shape. Whereas if you're in more of a square 30 by 32, that works well for a classroom where maybe the teacher wants to be in the middle and have a ring around them of all these seats, and everybody's kind of equidistant from the teacher. So it a lot of times comes down to what the teachers want or what the district wants, and what are their latest trends that they're seeing when they're designing these new classrooms. To how do they want to teach? And I think that's always a really interesting conversation.
Do you ever find, just for curiosity's sake, do you ever find the struggle of, when you're given an ed spec or something, and it's got all this casework, all of this, tack boards and marker boards and everything else that, they require X amount of linear feet of all of this stuff, and you have to have, as much natural light as you could, get into there. And you're like, okay, so you've got all these windows, you've got all this glass, but you got all this crap that you want to put on the walls, you're just like, where are you getting all of this space? And it's kind of fun because, it's an interesting way of, figuring out how you can kind of configure the room to be as flexible as possible. Because, being married to a teacher, I know that she liked, she loves doing like these little breakout spaces. She likes to reconfigure the room a lot so that, they're not just in a static, stale environment, that, you do have, kind of a,
you change it up.
The room was set up like this, earlier in the year. Now it's set up like this. So, it's just not the same thing all the time.
Right.
And, trying to, within the, rectangular walls, try to get the most flexibility out of it, is always a fun challenge. And I starting my career off doing more, civic stuff and not really doing any schools, I actually really enjoy doing schools a lot more because, the environment, of just kind of trying to create something that is pretty generic and trying to push it so that, you can enable learning, you can enable these, aha moments and stuff in just like the most, obscure little corner of the room, is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I worked on a project in San Marcos which is down in San Diego, and a lot of schools we do in California are kind of a bunch of separate buildings put together on a campus, and you make kind of an overall campus complex.
Right.
But this school was more or less one big building, and we don't get that too often out here in California. That's a lot more prevalent in the Midwest.
Or what we do.
Because of the weather, right?
Yeah.
Is typically the big driver behind that. But out here in Southern California, this was different for us. And one of the approaches that we took was, it was a K-8. So the kids were going to be there for a long time. And this kind of gets back to these articles where you're creating pathways that people cross. And we had designed it where there was a lot of interior circulation when you have one big building, and it kind of broke off in all these different directions. And one of the ideas that we had was that as the kids grow up and they're in this space, they're going to be there for 8 or 9 years, whatever, 10 years maybe if they're no, but
if they're Neil,
but it was the idea was that kids would find, because not only are they going to be in a different classroom every year, maybe as like a home base, but they're going to find new ways to get from one place to another in the campus as they grow up and as they're more and more familiar. And these are going to be kind of pathways that they establish, and they get to teach to the younger generation as they move up a year, and then they can say, okay, now that you're it's kind of like the secret handshake, right? It's like, now that you're a 6th grader, I'm going to show you what the back way, the secret way to get to the multipurpose room. And so we had designed in, and kind of the idea was like an ant farm, when you see that cross section and you get to see all these cool little pathways that connect this big community space to this other classroom or this other public space. And we had started to think about it like that. And I thought that was a neat way for us to explore this whole notion of intersection, where the people, it's just as interesting what happens outside of the classroom as what happens inside the classroom. And something that we were really focusing on was that learning happens everywhere. So there's indoor classrooms, there's outdoor classrooms, there's these collaboration spaces that are breakout rooms, but then there's also community spaces. And just the way that these spaces all get woven together with these different pathways. It's similar to what they're talking about in these articles where, those are the times when people can really talk about ideas with other people that they're not spending 6 hours in a classroom with or in a laboratory with. And I think that's a very interesting way that architecture can start to inform behavior, right? Because it creates a place for that kind of thing to happen. And then you can start to take it further once you introduce different types of materials and colors. I mean, it's definitely been shown that color and material and stuff can affect mood.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, there's a lot of different ways that architects can actually... And I think it's funny because the definition that Neil read up front was that it was baseless, right? That if we went back and read that again, it was very terse in the way that they say that.
I believe it was groundless. But
groundless.
Yeah,
groundless. But, I mean, that brings up, Evan, you were just talking about the ant maze and... But what do you do? I mean, because you're talking about when you dealt with the different pathways and different ways to create interactions. But what if you take it to that next level, which one of the articles points out, Frank Geary's Stata Center at MIT, where he took it even further, where he did manipulate the inside spaces and actually the outside spaces in very strange and odd ways, which... we'll put another link to another article about asking if it really works for a lot of other reasons like waterproofing and other problems like that this structure's had. But I find it very interesting. And I've never been to it, but so if anybody has that's listening to the podcast, please let us know what your experience was, visiting this. But it would seem like. What Frank Geary did here was take that same idea, but now take it to the next level to the interior spaces, instead of just doing the different shapes of the rooms that you guys were talking about with schools, but let's just completely blow that up and do different shapes.
Well, that's what I think. I think we're talking about that too, because that stuff becomes really interesting. The pathways between the spaces can also be a place where learning happens. I know that like they did it at MIT, he says right here, it sounds contrived, but the communal spaces are the places where a spontaneously struck up conversation might lead to the kind of breakthroughs that every institution is looking for. I mean, they're actually saying that this building attracts the top physicists in the field because of the type of breakthroughs that happen there, because the architecture has enabled those things to happen. And I feel like schools can be like that too. We aimed a corridor so that when you're looking out the end of it, you're looking at the university across the hill so that you can see where you're going in the future.
Nice.
And that's an important connection for education of all these kids. They're going to be there for 8 years. They want to see what's coming next, right?
So what you're really saying, Evan, is that all of our clients out there should pay us more money because of all the effort in design that we're putting into these buildings that they're not even going to notice.
Well, they will notice it because you're going through that process with them. And I feel like when we brought things up like that during the meetings, they'd get a big old grin on their face, right? And oh my gosh,
well, let me rephrase
they
that.
become part of the story. You're talking about the people who are working there, and they
well,
have no idea.
Let me rephrase that then our clients need to pay us more for the value that we're bringing to their project because their kids and their teachers, and in those cases, or the scientists are going to want to work in that building. You know, so that's the value. So sometimes when like, what? We're going to pay you how much money to design our building? Well, yeah, you're going to pay me that.
The value is way higher.
Because look at the value that I, as an architect, am bringing to your project. And sometimes that's really hard to put a dollar number to, right? I mean, that's hard to put that dollar value to. But, that's the challenge that we as architects have when we're talking to a client about how much this is going to cost. We're not just a drafter here's your plan for your kitchen remodel. It's like, no, I'm going to design you a kitchen that is going to be so cool that when you go to sell this house, it's going to sell for $15,000 or $20,000 more than your neighbor's house because you've got a cool designed kitchen, right?
Well, we should be doing that.
You need to pay me more money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, the definition of design is obviously more than delivering the most basic programmatic requirements. To me, design is a moving human experience. It is something that creates these moments. It is something that raises the level of your client's client. In our case, it's you want to raise the level of this kid's education. You want to raise the level of the teachers who are giving that education. You want to give them the tools spatially that they can use to deliver the best education possible to these kids. And you're right, Neil, these are things that aren't something you can put a direct dollar value to, but they do make a difference in the overall the transformation of that enterprise that's involved. You can definitely make them better. And I think that is part of our goal as architects when we're working with these clients, is to open their eyes to those types of possibilities.
I mean, yeah. I mean, when Neil was saying, how do we quantify that dollar? We should be bringing that to the table every time we do a project, regardless. I mean, so when we are fashioning a fee, it's not, how do I quantify, this value that I'm bringing to it? Them hiring you is the value. You bringing those skills to the table to create the best possible design is that value. So, when you're fashioning your, fee proposals, all of that's part of it. I mean, it's already built in. I mean, there isn't, well, okay, I'm going to give them a fee proposal of the bare bones, just get to a code compliant building. You're giving them a fee on, I'm going to give them the best and baddest, building that I could possibly give them because that's what I do.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like too many times architects design the building for other architects to look at, right? It's about the fashion.
Right.
And honestly, your client could say, make it Mediterranean. And you should say, okay. And you should, because you'll notice that the things that we're talking about here have nothing to do with what it looks like on the outside. Right. It all has to do with the planning. It all has to do with the functionality of creating place for amazing things to happen. And that can happen in practically anything. That it almost doesn't matter what it looks like. It's like these old physics buildings that they're talking about, these dilapidated boxes that people worked in. But it was all about the energy that was created in the working environment on the inside that really made those breakthroughs possible. And I think that that's still true in the institutions that we're designing today.
Oh, yeah.
But too many people feel like the architect is only there to make it look a certain way. I think it's interesting. If you look it up on Yelp for the MIT building, I mean, the ratings are pretty stellar. People love the building. And they're talking about how irregular it is, but how inspiring it is. And I think that's really something that's a lot of people overlook about space, is that it can be inspiring, right? And I mean, that's when you feel like you're really successful, right? Is if people can come away and feel inspired after being in a space. I mean, what better job can you possibly do?
You're right.
Speechless. Okay, so that wraps up.
Well, I mean, Evan's right. I mean, it never should be we all go into a design process, with a little bit of selfishness, saying, ooh, I'm going to make the, best looking building I can. And, and that's not something that we should kind of shrug at and say, okay, well, don't do that. But if that's your one and only goal, it's not going to be a very successful building. It may be pretty on a picture, but it's not going to be this, emotionally evoking, space, and that's what we should really be, So that's what, so when you're talking about how do you quantify that in your fees, I mean, you don't have to. That's what you're bringing.
Yeah, I feel like there's too many times when if somebody gets wind that the client only wants the building to look a certain way, they kind of give up and basically say, well, there's no more design opportunities here. When to me it's like, okay, now we know that constraint. Okay, we got that out of the way.
Exactly.
Now let's look at where all the opportunities are, because there are so many. And honestly, the success of a project comes down to what those clients talk about afterwards, right? And for how long they talk about it. Because really, that's what's going to get you your next job. I loved working with this architect because they solved my problems and they brought this extra stuff to the table. And they did exactly what we wanted, but they did even more than that. And I feel like if that's what the argument about what architecture is right there. It's about how did we raise their level.
Well, so guys, I want to ask this. I'm going to jump in. Going back to the very first article, get your guys' opinion on this. There's a few architects quoted in this article. Most specifically, I'll point out a couple of them just because they're kind of fun. But Frank Lloyd Wright, when designing, it says here, designed to falling water. Okay, we know that. Similarly believed appropriate architecture would save the U.S. from corruption and turn people's backs back to wholesome endeavors. And then also Le Corbusier about Villa Savoye said that building would heal the sick. So are these guys just being crazy, or do you think they really believed it, or were they that deep into what they thought they were designing that, really a building could heal the sick? I mean, maybe.
Well, it's not necessarily,
maybe
you
not
don't necessarily have to take that literally.
Okay, well, how would you take it then?
I mean, if you want to just, rather than looking at, Corb's, quote at face value, you look a little bit deeper into it, creating spaces that kind of heal your soul in a way. I mean, it just makes you feel better to be in a specific space. I mean, you can also go back to probably even, Frank Lloyd Wright's comment, I mean, these are when I'll give you a good example. So I was walking through, the bureaucracy of, the school board, when you've got, a Department of, construction or capital construction, you've got all these different people. And so I usually deal with the project manager, on a day-to-day basis. But, when their bosses come out, I was walking through my Annapolis project, and we were walking through, and as we turned the corner, she just blurted out really quick, "Holy shit, that's cool." And it was because this gesture that we did with the corridors, we basically, made these corridors kind of, as you turn the corner, you're face to face with the state capitol building. But then you turn the corner again, and you're overlooking there's in downtown Annapolis, they've got a city docks area with, where, all the old clipper ships and, things like that used to come in. And so you're overlooking that. And then you turn the corner again and you're into the media center. Now you're overlooking the Naval Academy. And she never realized that when we were going through all of these things. Now she's actually seeing it in practice, and she's like, wow, it was such a visceral reaction. And going back to Corb's, this building would heal the sick. I mean, maybe not heal the sick and, heal their wounds or anything, but maybe it's that feeling of like, wow, this is a really great space. This is a space that I could just sit back and relax and just kind of unwind and feel better about, the crappy day I had or something.
Sure. I mean, there's spaces in just about every building. There's going to be some spaces that are depressing and some that are uplifting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
and they could be indoor, they could be outdoor, they could be whatever. But I mean, it could have to do with the light. It could have to do with the height, the volume, the color. There's so many things that play into that we know that buildings can make people sick.
Yeah.
Right.
My boiler room's a dank, nasty dungeon.
That's where you're recording, right?
Yeah.
So that's why Cormac's always depressed when he's recording. So now we know why.
No, it's just a cold basement.
Well, what happens when architecture fails, though? And what I mean by that is another quote in here where some buildings were designed here, and I guess it was Joseph Leanweber provided community spaces and safe enclosed play yards. But by the 1960s, however, it was seen as a hot spot for crime and poverty and demolished in the 70s. So there's, the guy tried something and thought it would work, and we failed.
Right.
And wham, torn down. So it's interesting how over time, we try these things and what we think would work, and maybe it does for a short while, but then it gets used in a different way and maybe goes downhill, and then suddenly we realize, yeah, that was horrible.
Well, I think that makes a lot of architects gun shy, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who only expect perfection, and when you're failing with a project that big where it has to be demolished, I mean, that's failing in public, right? And that's it's on display. That failure is on display and it's taken down. But I mean, that's part of the scientific method. I mean, you do have to put things out there and try them, and it's not like the architect made all those decisions all by themselves.
Yeah, in this particular case, I mean, what you were talking about, and this is the case countrywide, really, is these were the projects. These were housing projects, and they were built to respond to the social need, the community need for a lot of housing, and they thought it was a social experiment that these could be gathering spaces and all that other stuff, and it didn't work out that way. Because it could have been because there was a lack of diversity. It could have been, for a variety of different reasons. And so, Evan, you're right. I mean, you follow this pattern that, and it wasn't just the architect. In fact, you can almost go back to blaming Corbu in a way when you're talking about these, because, he came up with these city blocks of building after building after building that was just kind of this, way of, housing the masses. I don't want to get off on that tangent.
I think you might call that architectural rigor.
Yeah. I didn't want to get off on that tangent, so I'm going to stop. That one, because that's really honestly a different conversation altogether about, because I was having a conversation with, some of the more recent graduates in our office, and we were talking about an interview that she had watched with, oh my gosh, who was it? One of the New York Five architects, not Meyer. But anyway, he was going on about how architects don't have any social they don't need to have any social responsibility. They're in it to build. And it came off as possibly not exactly what he meant, but it came off as a rather, crappy statement.
So are we talking about Eisenman, Graves,
Eisenman, thank you.
Eisenman. Okay, Eisenman.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, if you go and you watch his interview on the movie Citizen Architect, which was about the rural studio and Sam Mockbee, he comes off as the architect nobody really wants to be, because he's basically saying that we have no responsibility to the public, the client, or anything else. It's about the building. It's about, what we feel is right. They're hiring us because of our knowledge and our abilities that just shut up and let us do our job kind of thing.
Nice guy. That sounds like a guy you really want to work for.
And and we were talking about the social the social responsibilities and social aspects of of architecture, and to get back to these it's almost his attitude is what kind of created these these things that are now being demolished all over the country. But again, like I said, that I'd like to save that for maybe another topic some other time. Sure. Because though it does sort of correspond with what we're talking about, it's just not really. I mean, it can go back to the whole Corbu thing of healing the sick again. Again, it's that visceral, emotional thing, and so I'm done. Shut up.
Well, thank you for the story, Uncle Cormac. I really appreciate that. I can go to bed now.
I wish I could.
Another 5 minutes and you probably will. Okay, don't everybody talk at the same time.
Just reading parts of this article.
Well,
No, go ahead, Cormac. Evan's going to cut all this out anyway.
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, I was just trying to maybe circle back around to what we were talking about with the often overlooked spaces that are usually the opportunity spaces.
Like what?
Like negative spaces, or?
Well, in the article, he's more talking about the core and the circulation and stuff like that. Is kind of trying to bring it back to where we were talking about with these articles. Please cut all this stuff out.
Already done. Well, I think it's interesting that he says the result of this is a curious situation in which architects need to spend much of their time and budget on the circulation and core spaces that are often overlooked in favor of swanky offices, lobbies, or conference rooms.
Right.
And so, in the Gehry building at MIT, one of their strategies was it seems like every corridor, there's a couple shots of them in here where they're lined with whiteboards and blackboards, and they're just. This is something that we've used on quite a few of our projects as well. When we talk about how learning happens everywhere in schools, you create all of that space is space they're paying for. They should be able to use it all.
Oh yeah,
and that really, once you start thinking like that, instead of it's just being a double-loaded corridor that only gets used between classes, it actually is a usable space for education and learning and the exchange of ideas and stuff like that. I think that's part of the thing that makes it successful, because they're talking about these interactions that just pop up out of nowhere. They never saw it coming, but this is the stuff that actually attracts people to these institutions to do work there, because they know that they're going to be challenged at any moment, and they look forward to those challenges. It's a pretty cool way to think about space. I mean, even on, Neil, I don't know how much of this you do on a residential level, but it seems like, like that house you sent photos of that you were measuring, it just seems like every space has been paid attention to, even if it seems to be a secondary or tertiary space. It's all, a stair connecting two levels. There's something going on there that makes it special. Right, or makes it usable.
Sure, and it depends on the type of residential project you're working on. It's probably more difficult when you're trying to do an addition or a small remodel, and you're trying to stay within you're staying within the footprint. You probably don't have any views or things you can do, but it's certainly something you think about. It's like, okay, what is my experience when I come into this space, and what am I looking at, and how do I use this space, and how does it relate to the next one? And
Right.
so yeah, I mean, you think about these same types of things on a very different scale, and obviously you're not worried so much about interactions between the family down the hallway, for instance, but you do think about sometimes the transition spaces between. In fact, I was looking at a project earlier this week where we're going to take up a bedroom that's adjacent to a living space and kind of shift that living space, make it bigger and such. But the interesting thing about it is that it's almost going to make the room too big, and right now it kind of has this fireplace in it, and suddenly now the fireplace is going to be out kind of almost in the middle of the space, not even in the middle, more towards the side. And so it's like one of the interesting challenges that quite honestly I haven't solved yet, but it's like, okay, well, how do we use this kind of 8 to 10 foot wide space that's just kind of, it's got a stair coming into it, it's got the kitchen's going to be coming into it, and it's a lot of different things are happening. So what happens in that space? Mm-hmm. How do you either furnish it or make it feel like it's a part of the living room? So but it's kind of what some of these articles are talking about. It is that kind of connection space, and how does that function within the family? Maybe it becomes a space for them to gather and do stuff in that's kind of in between some of these spaces. So it'll be interesting to see how this one works out. But but it is something in residential you think about all the time. Not so much corridors outside, because once you're kind of inside the house, although the house you're referring to, Evan, is this one that was in the hills, and it's a private residence, and so I can't really post pictures about that one, but you guys have seen a few shots of it, and but that one was very interesting. I mean, because it was a completely custom home. It wasn't a production house, or a tract house that was built 20 or 30, 40 years ago, and that one was up on a hill. It was overlooking a lake, and it had a lot of interesting things going on where, spaces were intersecting with other ones, not only in levels, but also in visual, because there was glass in certain areas, and so you could see down through into areas. And
there was indoor-outdoor connections that were...
A lot of it.
Visual as well as physical. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting stuff.
Yes.
I think one of the interesting things, that you could approach any one of these projects with is how different people who are using the building have a different experience. Kids are going to experience space and the connection and flow of spaces much differently than adults would, and men and women are going to experience things differently, and same thing in schools. A senior is going to experience something very differently than a first-time freshman who comes into a campus. And I feel like that stuff is pretty interesting, and one of the techniques that we've used when interviewing and even during the design process is to talk about the story of those different people and how they're going to experience things, and really get the conversation going about the different groups of people who are going to be experiencing it in different ways, and how those needs are going to change over time, or how their experiences are going to change throughout the life of the project.
You know what that reminds me of, Evan? When I was in second year design at Cal Poly, when we started, we had to, basically because we didn't have clients, we had to make them up.
Yeah.
And we had to
make up everything about them, right?
We had to make up everything. We had to do their whole backstories, write bios for them, and really understand who these people were. Because we essentially created our clients, and then we had to design a house for our clients. And what made that project even more interesting is as we, that was just like the first part of the quarter. And then, it might have only been like 2 weeks or something. We kind of got to that level.
Yeah, you got to do it quick.
Yeah, you do it quick. But what was interesting is that when we got to that point, that the instructor just said, okay, well now you're going to partner up, and we're going to build teams, right? And so you built a team, and so at least for me, I partnered with 3 other people. Most of us were like teams of 4. But then we had to, take all of those people and put them on one site
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, we're going to design a house or multiple houses, however you want to do it. But we had to, like, I remember I even took a picture of this. We came in on a Saturday, and we had the chalkboards in the classrooms. We kind of had those like double chalkboards that were as wide as the room, and we like filled almost the whole thing, writing all about the different characters we were trying to design for, and everything about them and how they could interact, or would they interact, with their personalities interact, and then how were we going to design something to respond to all of that. And it was a fascinating process. And, second year design, and I'm thinking, I'm doing exactly what I would be doing for essentially the rest of my career. Here I was doing it right in, a second year design class at Cal Poly.
Yeah,
I just didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty fascinating, process to go to. So I'm curious if any of our student listeners out there have been involved in a studio class like that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had similar stuff when we were in studio as well. And it was pretty interesting even you're working with other team members and they approach that differently, right? I mean,
sure.
So not only are you designing with those potential clients in mind, but you're also designing with, and it's the same with the teams that we work with today, where people have different points of view and different experiences, and the way that all that comes together is always, it's unique, right? For every project, it's unique, and it always is something that I think about. It's like, wow, if there was just one person different on this team, if somebody replaced me, it would be a completely different project. And I always find that very interesting about what we do.
So if we replace Cormac, this podcast would be completely different. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah.
Well, with that...
Not saying it would be better. I'm just saying it would be different.
Okay. So with that, if you have any questions or comments, visit the website at archispeakpodcast.com. There you'll find links to our Twitter accounts and the Facebook page where you can join in on the conversation. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, the Archispeak Podcast hotline, or helpline, if you will, is at 415-484-8496. And,
no help guaranteed.
No help guaranteed. Yes, we're not trained physicians, but we'll listen. So please give us a call. And if you haven't done so already, please leave us a review on iTunes. We especially like those.
Yeah, and hey, everybody who's posting pictures of their Archispeak t-shirts, we love to see that.
Oh,
so
that was awesome. All of them.
Yeah, very cool. All the shirts have gone out, and so hopefully everybody's gotten theirs. Maybe not the one that went to New Zealand is there yet, but it should be there pretty soon. So very cool that you guys bought those shirts. So we really appreciate it. And till next time.
Exactly.
Right? Stay subscribed, and thanks for listening.
All right. See you later.
See you guys.